right, we're here with John Lisbin. He is running for Seattle City Council, District Number 6. John, let's take about 2 minutes to introduce yourself.
Right. Hi, I'm John, and well, I'm running because I don't feel like the city is managing growth in a smart way, and I don't feel like they are listening to the legitimate concerns of the residents. And you probably are going to hear that from a lot of candidates, but I think I coined that. And my background is pretty much, well, I ran a business for 15 years. It was a digital advertising company that was pretty successful. It became a $6 million business, and we had about 50 employees. So it was a very successful company, and I learned a lot about building good culture and building a great company, and I think we're gonna kind of need that in Seattle. And I also earned an EMPA, a Master's in Public Administration, about 4 or 5 years ago, which is why I ran the first time. Kind of got into it, and it was kind of an internship, and I've been really preparing actually for the last 4 years for this role, going to Toastmasters, trying to figure out all the things that I didn't know before, and what I learned on the first campaign trail. Getting a campaign manager, getting a strategist, and I feel like I'm a lot more prepared. I also got into more advocacy with Seattle Fair Growth, which this group that was building, was really concerned about the livability of Seattle, that as we grow, we retain the infrastructure and build the infrastructure we need to support that, so the growth pays for growth. And that's really was our values. We were concerned about displacement of vulnerable individuals, and that's pretty much my background that brings me up to today.
Great, thank you. Jason, would you like to start off with number 1? You may turn over your sheet as well if you'd like.
Yes, if elected, what policies will you support to address the need for affordable housing and homelessness services?
Thank you. Yes, and last time I ran, affordable housing was probably the most important thing that I heard, and now it's homelessness. Everybody I talk to, I ask, what's the most important thing that you want the council to do better? And 99% it's homelessness. And Seattle is getting better, I think, at positive outcomes, yet here in Ballard, or where I live, in District 6, homelessness has quadrupled in just the last year. So I'm not sure how you really reconcile that, other than the fact that I think that more and more people are becoming homeless. So some policies like what the state just did for preventing evictions, that was I agreed with. And on a local level, I think it's really important that we build in that I believe in housing first. That's the most important thing. And the state is also helping out a lot. They really stepped up now and made it a priority to build permanent supportive housing and for treatment. And but on a local level, we have to really treat this as an emergency. That emergency is. We can't just say it's an emergency. And we have to support 24/7 supportive housing and treatment on demand. And that's pretty much, I think, what we can do on a local level. And if we can get people, and we have to work harder to build a bridge so people can move off the streets and get off the streets and get the treatment they need and get some hope. If we can get people off the streets, I think the residents of Seattle will want to support more permanent solutions.
Next question, Clayton?
Seattle has the most progressive tax code in a state with the most progressive tax code in the country. Given the repeal of the head tax and the ongoing litigation over the city income tax, how would you raise more progressive revenue to help fund city services?
Yeah, that's a great question too. And yes, we have the most progressive tax code in the country. Portland, of course, has an income tax. And the reason why it's regressive as sales tax, as we all know, is because people with lower incomes are paying a higher proportion of their income on taxes. And usually that's because they have to eat and they have to buy clothes and all that. And I do support an income tax in Seattle. I think what is important is we need taxation that is that can drive revenue. We need taxation that is or a tax plan or a tax scheme that is you know, that we can get through policy-wise, because that's really, so those are some of the criteria that I think we need as far as taxation. I actually wrote a little policy thing on taxation when I was at the Evans School, and I definitely learned a lot about you know, our tax system, how dysfunctional it is. I think our B&O tax is pretty dysfunctional as well, because it's very administrative heavy. And as a small business person too, we had some issues with the B&O tax. And as far as the head tax, I actually supported that. I thought it was a good plan, but I was concerned about how we're going to spend the money. That was really my biggest concern. As a business person, again, I knew that, you know, $250 a month or a year per employee is really kind of de minimis when you're considering that employees, let's say, getting $15 an hour, who work 40 hours a week full time. The minimum wage is $30,000 a year. So I think I had that perspective that it wasn't.
Time.
Thank you.
Thanks. Okay, and I think we are on to the next question then.
Given the city's reset of the Move Seattle levy, the upcoming expiration of the city's bus funding tax, and the planning for light rail through much of our district, what will be your priorities in deciding how the city spends its transportation funds?
Another great question. My priorities are really what helps people move. And I don't think, for instance, this central, I'm not a supporter of this central trolley because it's basically, it's pretty slow, and it's going to cost about $500,000 over 10 years for the central trolley. And I think what people really are concerned about here in Seattle is east-west traffic and, of course, going downtown. So I would much rather see that money spent on microbusing and solutions like that, so that we can solve a lot of our traffic problems. I also kind of support congestion pricing. I think I'd like to see how that works in New York, but it's very successful in Stockholm, Singapore, other countries. And that money can be used for transportation. And I also finally support, you know, I support the bicycle master plan. I think we need to build, you know, we have to realize that Seattle, 100,000 more people are going to come here within the next 10 years. And it's really important that we build that infrastructure so people can get around without cars.
Thank you. Jeff?
How will you continue the process of reforming the Seattle Police Department beyond the expiration of the consent decree?
I'm sorry, can you repeat that, please?
Yeah, how will you continue the process of reforming the Seattle Police Department beyond the expiration of the consent decree?
Right. Well, Initiative 940 passed it, kind of removed the law that, so now police can be prosecuted, but then the council approved a contract that kind of overruled a lot in Initiative 940. So I really think that, you know, it's a real balancing act when it comes to the police department. And of course, nationally and locally, you know, people of color and low-income people are much more likely to get killed by police officers. But on the other hand, here in Seattle and here in District 6, you know, we need more police and we can't hire police. And I think Jenny did the right thing when she's, giving police a bonus to try to recruit more police here in Seattle. But as a business owner, I also know that compensation is just table stakes. It's really about building a great culture here. So I think it's important that the city council really supports our police. And I think also in our district, we need 2 precincts, not just 1, because it's just too hard to get around and we're too large. So I think people really need to feel safe in Seattle, whether it's perception or reality. People don't feel safe, especially women, including my wife, who has to, ride her bike to University of Washington Medical Center. And a lot of women I speak to are very nervous about public safety issues. So it's important that we have a better police presence here in our district.
Now we're going to move on to the questions. 1 minute responses. Ellis?
I'm wondering what your ideas for like missing middle housing are, and specifically if you have a position on changing the zoning structures in single family neighborhoods.
Well, yeah, that's a great one. And full disclosure, at Seattle Fair Growth, we built a coalition of 29 community neighborhood groups to appeal mandatory housing affordability's environmental impact study. And we did that not because we felt that mandatory housing affordability or having developers actually contribute to affordable housing, I think is a great idea while they build, and you have to give them something. But we felt that there was not enough neighborhood input and that there should have been more inclusionary housing in the building and more incentives to include housing as development occurred. And so we're just, and also we were concerned about the displacement of a lot of people when it comes to housing that is actually bulldozed in order to create more housing. But in general, I believe there are a lot of ways to, well, I won't go into affordable housing, but you're talking about zoning, and I think it's really important that we change zoning to build 2 and 3 bedroom housing rather than what we're building right now, which is mostly studios and 1 bedrooms. And I can't really imagine how you can afford to live in, or a lot of young people right now who need to, get family size housing.
Okay. Ben and then Clayton?
Can you tell me in 2018 how many homeless people are living in Seattle or King County?
12,000.
And of that, how many came from Seattle?
There's about, according to the Count Us In survey, about 85% were from King County.
So what action will you take in your first week in office to mitigate this homelessness crisis?
Well, my first week in office, I think I think it's important that I get to know my other, first week to get to know my other council members and come to some, and work as in consensus, because I think that's one of the most important things. As a business owner, again, I worked on a goal management team, maybe 8 people, and we're all working for the same things. And I don't think if everybody on the city council, I think we have to work in unison, and I think that's really important.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I've been musing about the city of Seattle bonding capacity and to what extent is it maxed out in the context of the number of 12,000 homeless people. At the same time that Yesler Terrace was just blitzed and turned into, relative to the earlier Yesler Terrace, upscale housing. So maybe you could tell us something about those things.
Sure. Well, that's actually kind of how I feel we should be building low-income housing, because we can't just keep building housing, let the market just keep building housing. We're building plenty of housing right now. We're the crane capital of the world, but that's not producing affordable housing. So we have to use that bonding capacity with the tools that we have available to us, like the real estate excise tax, or bring back a portion of the property taxes, which we used to have. So I think that's, and those funds are bondable. So yeah, I think the answer to low cost housing is we have to build it. Yeah.
Just to follow up on what Ben's question, that 12,000 number, did that come from the one night count, or what source did you get that from?
Yes. Well, it actually went down a little this year. I know. I don't know the exact amount.
Okay. And then following up on that, did you know the one night count does not include sheltered homeless folks? And do you believe sheltered homeless folks are homeless?
Yes and yes.
Okay. What data are you going to be looking at between now and then election day, presuming you win, to become more educated on the needs of the homeless population?
Well, I'm continuing to learn as long as I'm running, and I continue to read about drug dependency and the opioid crisis and all the different reasons why people become homeless. And I just don't feel that you can categorize people without homes as one way. There are so many reasons why people become homeless. The specific data that I'm reading just a ton of articles. I have friends who are helping me with articles, and I want to meet some of the experts in the area too to help me understand exactly what's happening.
John, follow-up question about the bonding authority you talked about. Are we talking about city-owned buildings or private partnership or what?
Well, the city using bonding authority to work with nonprofits to build housing.
All right, thank you.
I think we have time for about one more.
One more,
What about the Seattle Housing Authority? I mean, everybody's very concerned about 12,000 people plus to take on Matt's point who are homeless. What we have is outer Mongolia of bureaucracy in the Seattle Housing Authority, which is a kind of world unto itself. It's got a charter from the city. It's a Section 8 oriented. Why are they not part of the conversation? Should their charter be rewritten? Why are they not part of the solution to this problem? Since that's what they do. They provide housing primarily for those people.
They should be part of the solution. And I mean, we're gonna need every possible tool we have to get people housed, and every organization. But I also think that we really have to focus on what are the vital few things that we can do in the city and to get people housed. And again, sorry I'm diverting that question, but I think it's really about bridge housing in Seattle, what we can do, and the state and the federal government are also stepping up to do more permanent support housing. But what we can do in Seattle is help people with 24/7 supportive housing and treatment, and also preventing people from becoming homeless in the first place. I think that's really our biggest bang for the buck.
All right, thank you. If you'd like to go ahead and take about 30 seconds to wrap up.
Yeah, I just want to thank everybody for coming here. I know you're all volunteers, and I really appreciate that. And you're all 36 Democrat volunteers, just like me, or a lot more than me, because you spend a lot more time. And you know, I'm meeting a lot of people, I'm knocking on a lot of doors, and like I said, 99% of them are concerned about the homeless issue. But I want to listen to everybody, whether I agree with them or not, because I think it's really important. And I'm learning a lot from listening to people who have different points of view. And the way I'm thinking is evolving as I'm meeting more and more people, and I'm learning from them. And I think that's what people want in a representative. So that's why I'm running. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you.